2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff on the 26th Space Shuttle mission, and it is cleared the tower.
Welcome to the power workout portion of the program, where we will cover the squat, leg press, deadlift, and calf raise. We begin with the conventional squat. The squat is an excellent, powerful exercise that closely mimics the motion of the vertical leap. The squat focuses on the glutes and the quads. Before we get started, we always want to be cautious with the lower back, and we suggest you use a belt to support your lower back. Although it's not necessary, if you're a beginner, it's a good idea to use one. Also, be very careful and start with very low weight. Beginning with excessive weight could be dangerous. By the time you get to this exercise in your workout, you should be very tired. It's best to focus on your form and to be patient. Pay close attention to the lessons that follow. We'll present to you what to avoid and how to be safe. Now, let us discuss proper technique. A good way to reinforce proper technique is to start with a weightless bar in a cage or squat rack. You want to position the bar at the proper height so that you don't need to get on your tiptoes to pick up the bar or bend over too far to initially lift it. You also want to have catch bars in place to catch the weight in the event you don't have enough energy to lift it. And use clips to secure the weights so that they don't slip off the bar. Once you're safely prepared, you should approach and set up at the middle of the bar and place your hands slightly wider than your shoulders. Step underneath and squeeze your shoulders back to create a trapezius cushion that forms on the top of your shoulders. The bar should sit on your traps, not your neck. Your arms and shoulder blades are back. Your elbows should be pointed down. If your elbows are not pointed down, they're probably pointing back and your shoulders might be rolling forward, and you'll find yourself in an uncomfortable position with the bar rolling onto your neck. If it's difficult to put and keep your shoulders and elbows in the proper position, you should stretch the front part of your chest and your shoulders as shown by the actor, and then get back into position. Now, lift the bar and step back and position your feet slightly wider than shoulder width apart, and your toes slightly pointed out, not drastically but slightly. Your head and eyes should be looking straight ahead and not up or down during the exercise. Your lower back should be in a stabilized and rigid position, that is, not lurching forward or rounding forward. Your abdominals should be tight to protect your lower back, and your chest should be up in a big chest position. The initial movement should come from sitting back with the hips and bending at the knees and ankles as if you were sitting in a chair. Focus on lowering your hips and keeping your weight on your heels during your descent. Lower yourself until your thighs are approximately parallel with the floor. Knees are staying back, bar is going straight down on a vertical plane, back is arched, weight is on your heels, bottom, then explode up. But don't bounce up. Quickly go from down to up, but without bouncing at the bottom. Forcefully explode directly vertical and upward. Again, sit back on the way down. Hips come back and pivot. Knees slightly forward but not excessively forward so that they extend past the toes. Then on the way up, the hips drive forward. You want to focus on driving the hips up. Now, let's cover some common mistakes to avoid. First, never drop your chest. Keep the chest up and lower back in rigid extension. Eyes and head forward. We've already discussed the problem of shoulders rolling forward, but let's demonstrate again. Remember to keep the shoulder blades back and your elbows pointed down. Another common mistake is improper hip to knee to foot positioning. Your knees, feet, and hips should remain in line on the way down and up. They should not bend in or out. An additional common mistake we want to demonstrate is related to knee position. As you sit back on the way down, your hips come back and pivot, and your knees should slightly come forward, but not excessively forward so that they extend past the toes. If your knees come too far forward, your hips are not back and your heels come up. Remember to keep the weight on your heels and not on the toes. Contrary to what most athletes are taught, you should inhale before you descend. Then hold your breath and wait to exhale until after you lock it out at the top. By holding your breath, you maintain better core stability. Many athletes are taught to exhale on the way up, but this sacrifices core stability. Now that you've learned how to properly perform the squat, we're ready to move on and review the leg press, which is a supplement to the squat if you're not comfortable placing a bar on your traps. The leg press is also an excellent exercise that simulates the powerful movements needed to explode into the air. We'd like to share some proper techniques and common mistakes with you. Remember, you should not begin with excessive weight. At this point in your workout, your legs should be fatigued. Be careful and focus on proper form and safety at all times. The first common mistake to avoid is not using enough range of motion. You should come all the way down and all the way up. The next mistake you should definitely want to avoid is lifting your butt up. You should never do this. Lifting the butt up puts too much pressure on your lower back and leads directly to injury. There should be handles on the machine to grab and pull so that you can keep your butt down. Use them. The last mistake we want to demonstrate relates to the alignment between your hips, knees, and feet. This alignment should not be compromised. For example, your knees protruding outward or inward is bad. Keep proper alignment by placing your feet on the platform at the same width as your hips, and keep your knees in line with your feet as you bend your knees and press the weight. So now that you know what to avoid, let's put it all together. First, position your feet as wide as your hips. Pull and keep your butt down. Press the weight with your heels. Keep your knees in line with your feet and hips. Come all the way down, all while keeping your butt down to protect your lower back from injury, and press to lockout. As the weight comes toward you, it should be a slow and controlled descent. The press should be explosive, but not to the extent you pull yourself out of proper form. Now, before we move on, we'd like to show you what you can do if you don't have access to a squat rack or a leg press machine. Use what you have. For example, the actor here has cinder blocks and a backpack full of textbooks. Even though it's a different setup, the motion of squatting and pressing up remains the same. When using an alternative like this, don't forget the proper form and safety techniques as well as common mistakes that we discussed earlier. Now that you have learned how to properly perform the squat and leg press, we're ready to move on to the deadlift. Now let's learn how to properly perform the conventional deadlift. The deadlift is the ultimate power and explosiveness exercise. It will balance out the muscles that we work on by squatting. Remember that squats focus on the glutes and quads. The deadlift focuses on the posterior chain, that is, your lower back, glutes, and hamstrings. Our goal is to strengthen your lower back and enhance posture. This will in turn increase the power and explosiveness of your whole body and allow you to jump higher. This is a lower back intensive exercise. We want to avoid back issues or even correct ones you may have. This can be accomplished by strengthening your lower back, but do it progressively. Be very careful and start with very low weight. Beginning with excessive weight could be dangerous. Do not try to be a superhero. By the time you get to this exercise in your workout, you should be very tired. It's best to focus on your form and be patient. Pay close attention to the lessons that follow. We'll present to you what to avoid and how to be safe. Now let us discuss proper technique. A good way to reinforce proper technique is to start standing with a weightless bar in hand. Your shoulders are back. Your chest is up. Your butt should be sticking out. You are activating all those muscles in your back. Remember, butt out, chest up, big chest. Your back is slightly arched in rigid extension, not lurched forward or rounding out. Your neck is long and your head is positioned forward, not up or down. Your shoulder blade should be back, not forward. The first place to bend is your hips. Begin tipping over while maintaining your posture. That is, your back should remain in rigid extension, not lurching forward. Keep your shoulder blades back and your butt out. Continue to tip over just enough for the bar to clear those knees. And now sink your hips. You are now in the beginning position to perform a deadlift. Keep the butt out, keep your chest big and shoulder blades back. Weight should be on your heels. Back set, chest raised. Extend your legs slowly to get the bar past your knees. Pull the bar straight back to lockout. Next, we would like to emphasize what not to do by demonstrating incorrect positioning. Your shoulders should not be rolling forward. Your shoulder blade should be back. Remember to maintain big chest. First and extremely important, don't round out your back or lurch forward. Do not slump forward. This is dangerous. Another problem with shoulder positioning is that some athletes tend to want to shrug the weight. Your shoulders should be down and not shrugging the weight. You shouldn't be lifting the weight with your biceps. Also, remember not to bend your arms at any point. Your elbows should not be bent at any time. Your arms should remain straight. Next, don't confuse the mechanics of the deadlift with a squat. You should not be squatting, and your hips should not raise before the bar does. Another problem that we constantly see is an athlete looking up or down instead of ahead. Remember, keep your neck long and look ahead. And last of the problems we see, but certainly not the least, do not over-exaggerate the lockout. You shouldn't be leaning back too far. The proper lockout is more natural. And now that we've covered the mechanical problems to avoid, let's move on to the basic setup and execution. Let's first show you proper foot positioning. Your feet should be shoulder width apart. However, if you're a taller athlete, it's sometimes preferred to have a wider stance, so that you're not bending over too far and compromising your proper form and mechanics. Your feet should be below the bar, so that when you look down, the bar cuts your feet in half. That is, the joints of your feet should be positioned in line with the bar, and the bar should be 2 to 3 inches away from your shins. Now that your feet are in proper position, you are ready to take grip of the bar. Your hands should be outside your knees. Now that you know where to place your hands on the bar, bend at the waist and take grip. Knees will incline until the point where they are against the bar. Your butt will be up and out, chest raised. Your shoulders are slightly in front of the bar. Set your back in arched and rigid extension. Maintain big chest. Shoulder blades back, neck long and looking forward. Pull the bar straight up and lock out. and repeat. One final note relates to proper breathing. Remember to inhale and take a short breath before picking up the weight, and hold your breath until you've reached the lockout. Take another quick breath when you're in the lockout position, and don't let it out until you're back in the next lockout position. By holding your breath, you maintain better core stability. Before we move on, we'd like to show you what you can do if you don't have access to a gym and weights. Use what you have. For example, the actor here has cinder blocks. Even though it's a different setup from the gym, the motion of the deadlift and pressing up remains the same. When using an alternative like this, don't forget the proper form and safety techniques, as well as common mistakes that we discussed earlier. Now that you've learned how to properly perform the squat and conventional deadlift, we're ready to move on and review the calf raise, which is the final power exercise. Now that you've learned how to properly perform the squat, leg press, and conventional deadlift, we're ready to move on and review the calf raise, which is the final exercise of the power drills. The calf raise can be performed on many different machines and techniques inside or outside a gym. To demonstrate, we'd first like to take you through some common mistakes and then coach you through the proper techniques. The first common mistake we often see is the athlete bending at the knee instead of holding the leg straight and isolating the calf muscles. No matter if you're using a rack or leg press machine, the rule holds that you should be attempting to isolate your calf muscles without bending at the knee. Another important point is to remember, just like we discussed with the squat and leg press, you should keep your feet, knees, and hips in line. If your knees begin bending out or in, this is not good, and you're putting unnecessary pressure on your knee ligaments. The calf raise is as simple as that. But remember to keep in good form, and don't forget all the cautionary tips we discussed related to the squat, leg press, and deadlift. And you should be ready to work those calves in the gym or outside the gym as shown here. In closing, as we've previously stressed, do not use too much weight and constantly focus on proper mechanics. And that completes the power video of this program. Now you're ready to move on to the audio segment that describes how to cool down.